They said it would be easy. "14 days, $10 million. It'll be a piece of cake as long as you stay inside," everyone told me. And I believed them. It made sense. What could happen if I just hunkered down, left everyone else alone, and waited out the days in solitude and quiet? It couldn't be that bad. I'd get the money I desperately needed and never have to think about it again. I could resort back to my normal life and leave the house behind me. Only 14 days. That was my mindset as I signed my name on the dotted line of the waiver, my rights fading away with every loop of the ballpoint pen. It was still my mindset as I was handed the dark gray heavy-duty jumpsuit and the backpack that would be mine for the next 2 weeks. It continued to be my mindset, even when I was loaded into a windowless van and transported to the place that would be my home for the next 14 days. The armed guard sitting near the door never looked at me. When the van finally stopped, my muscles were aching from sitting on the hard metal bench for so long. The edge had been digging into the back of my thighs the entire way, and my feet were cramped up from having to brace myself against all the bumps we encountered. I was herded into the house quickly, not giving me a full chance to fully appreciate the beauty of the multi-story wood building. Like all of the houses, it had been built especially for the next 2 weeks. In the small glance I got, I could tell the outside was beautiful. It had to be for the people watching at home. The inside of the house was well furnished and clean. Thin white curtains hung in front of the ceiling-to-floor windows. Wood-framed landscape photographs lined the walls, and plush couches surrounded a magnificent fireplace in the living area. The 9 other competitors were seated in the couches, dressed in the same gray jumpsuits I was, their backpacks slung over their shoulders or resting on the floor beside them. I did a quick head count and found that, out of the 10 of us, only 3 were women, including myself. Not as many as last year, but still a feat considering the game was only open to men in its first 20 years. I grabbed a seat next to the nervous-looking blonde woman who was digging into her palm with her fingers. The guard who had been escorting me took a spot around the perimeter of the room, joining the others who stood stoically, regarding us with impassive stares. We sat for a while, shuffling in our seats and glancing around at each other, eyes flickering from one person to another. One of the windows was open, and the sound of birds twittering to each other reached our ears. I could hear the distant sound of water running, probably coming from a stream that lay beyond the forest line. Huge pines and firs surrounded the house on all sides, and sunlight streamed through the gaps in the trees, brightening up the room. The distant sound of footsteps approaching brought me back to the room I was in, and I glanced around looking for the source. Coming from the hallway, a well-dressed man with hair as black as ink strode into the room, throwing his arms wide and smiling at us.
"Welcome, friends.
His voice was bright and soft, carrying an air of calm with it.
It is so good to see you all sitting here today."
He walked into the center of the room and stood looking at us.
I'm sure most of you recognize me, but I'll do my introductions anyway. Don't want to break protocol and have a redo of 2 years ago.
He winked at me and laughed, as if I were in on the joke with him.
Bram Thompson's the name, giving money is my game. Of course, you know what you need to do to get that money. You've all signed the waiver. You probably watched the show. Easy enough concept.
He snickered and went on, straightening his suit jacket.
All you need to do is live here for 14 days. If you can do that, you earn $10 million.
A beefy, heavily tattooed man sitting in the couch opposite mine jostled a little in his seat, his hands gripped tightly together, his eyes not leaving the ground.
Of course,
Bram continued, glancing around at us, his expression turned sober.
You will have obstacles that will impede your ability to do that. In your backpacks, you are equipped with supplies. However, you only have enough food for about a week, depending on your appetite.
Here he paused, gripping his belly and shaking as hysterical laughter overcame him. wiped a tear away from his eye and regained his posture.
We all know what happened to that greedy old Linus from Chicago a few years ago. Built like a freight train, ate all of his food within a day, and walked out the back door to go search the shed for more.
The guards shifted as Bram resumed giggling.
Barely made it to the second step.
At this, a few of the other contestants looked up at him disgusted. It was hard to deny the tangible hate that was beginning to brew towards this man. He went on.
Your jumpsuits are all equipped with a camera. This is to track your movements and for footage to give to the public. Do not attempt to remove your camera. This is grounds for immediate disqualification. If you look above you...
At this, he gestured to the black domes at regular intervals along the ceiling.
You will see more cameras. They are spread throughout the entire home, minus the bathroom.
He winked at me again, and a slimy feeling erupted in my stomach.
Do not attempt to destroy or tamper with these either. Same consequence.
He strode over to the door leading to the outside, its surface made of glass. Without the door handle and locking mechanism, it would have blended in with the rest of the windows.
This is the back door. To lock it, press the red button on the handle.
He demonstrated as we heard a slight click.
To open, press the green button. The front door works the same way.
We were escorted upstairs by the guards, and Bram showed us the 2 bedrooms. Mattresses spread out along the floor, pillows and blankets in the closets, windows covered by the same thin curtains. We passed by the bathroom on the way downstairs, and a quick peek in showed a beautiful stone shower with granite countertops, hand towels stacked above the toilet. As we gathered in the entryway circled around Bram, I knew this was it. Soon he would leave, and the game would begin. My palms turned clammy, and my breaths were short and shallow.
I've said about all I need to.
He smiled again, and I realized that no matter how much he grinned at us, it never reached his eyes. They were cold and heartless, almost mocking.
In a few hours, the game will begin. You know what you are up against. Not just yourselves, but the ones out there.
He gestured out the front door, and our eyes followed. Standing in the driveway were 10 others, surrounded by more gun-wielding guards. The contestants were dressed in dark blue jumpsuits and also carried backpacks. A combination of men and women, they were unmoving as their eyes locked in on our group. A few of them smiled. One of them pointed, and I could see him laughing. I looked away, my eyes stinging.
I wish you luck, contestants.
Bram had now opened the door, the guards filing out and down the front steps of the house. He regarded us with his piercing eyes, looking at each one of us in return.
If any of you wish to withdraw, now's the time.
No one moved. The house was silent, teeming with anticipation.
Very well.
He said, turning to leave.
Just remember, once I shut this door, any attempt to forfeit or surrender will be ignored. Do not take this lightly.
He glanced around, and once he seemed satisfied that no one was going to take him up on his offer, he smiled his greasy smile once more and ended with,
Well, I suppose congratulations are in order then. You are all officially contestants on the Killing House. I wish you luck.
His departure was swift and met with the click of the lock sliding into place as we bolted the door behind him. Immediately, people went to work taking note of the layout of the house and making introductions. Conversations were heard around the home as we readied for what would be our first night in the house. I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom and slung my heavy-duty backpack on the counter, wanting to take note of my supplies. Every year was different, and contestants weren't debriefed on what they would receive. I unzipped the biggest compartment and placed everything on the counter. Flashlight, pocket knife, red checkered bandana, a few feet of thin rope, a toothbrush, a small tube of toothpaste, an empty water bottle, spoon, pack of matches, space blanket, tweezers, and a postcard with a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge on it. The smaller compartment held the food that would last me a week. There were 7 MREs, a few packages of peanut butter crackers, a package of dry salami, a small jar of peanut butter, a bag of trail mix, and a small can of chicken noodle soup. In a side zipper, I found a small notebook with a black pen. Overall, not a bad haul. One year, they gave contestants nothing but a Bible and food for a day. The year after, contestants were each given a handgun in addition to food for the full 2 weeks. I wasn't given anything quite as lethal, but the pocket knife could come in handy. As I crammed everything back into the backpack, a knock on the door made me jump. My nerves were already on high alert, and night was hours away. I needed to calm down. I took a deep breath and unlocked the door. The man standing there gave me a small smile and a half wave.
Hey there.
He said, his teeth flashing bright white. His skin was darkly tanned, like he had just spent days in the sun. Hi, I replied, trying to shoulder past him to get to the staircase.
Whoa, just hold on a second.
He said, his brow furrowing.
I just wanted to introduce myself. Dylan Charmichael.
He held out his hand. I reluctantly shook it, feeling the roughness of his skin grip mine tightly. His eyes never left mine. They were dark blue and had an earnest look about them, as if he was genuinely excited to meet me. Under the circumstances, it was off-putting. Lena, I replied, breaking the handshake. He gave me another smile, and I gave him a small one in return. He was attractive. I shook the thought away and turned to head down the stairs into the living room. The other contestants were milling about, opening doors throughout the house and peering out the windows. I walked through the archway into the kitchen, where a man with a long ponytail was writing in his notebook at a counter, and a brunette with a nose ring was opening and closing cabinets. She seemed to be looking for something. I sat on a seat at the kitchen island and slid my backpack onto the surface. "Crap!" she shouted, slamming a drawer by the sink and whipping around, a can opener in her hand. "This is all I found in this whole kitchen! Bullcrap!" The man glanced up, shook his head disapprovingly, and went back to his writing. Another man holding a flashlight walked into the kitchen and regarded us with mild interest.
We haven't been in the basement yet. Anyone want to go check it out?
His dark skin contrasted with the stark white appliances, and his jumpsuit was stretched tightly over his muscled arms. Ponytail hardly looked up from what he was working on. "I'll go with," I volunteered. I glanced at the girl holding the can opener. She flung it into the sink. "There's nothing else in here. Might as well." I swung my backpack back around my shoulders and headed off with the 2 of them.
I'm Caleb, from Cincinnati.
The man said, leading the way to the wooden door down a hallway.
Nice and easy to remember.
He grinned and turned the handle on the door. Wooden stairs led to a dimly lit stone floor. Because of the lack of light, it was hard to see anything else beyond. Caleb searched the wall for a light switch, but there was none.
Well, we know those morons can't be in the house yet. Let's not get our panties into a bunch.
He switched on the flashlight and led the way down the stairs, the steps creaking with the weight. I followed and we descended. As Caleb panned his flashlight around the room, we took in its vast size. Stone walls wrapped around the huge room, giving it the feeling of a cellar. A water heater was in one corner, a steel workbench in another. A simple wooden door was on the wall across from us. "Let's check out that room," the girl said, her arms crossed. "I've seen that they sometimes leave weapons around the house." We quickly canvassed the room, but the only thing we found was an empty watering can below the stairs. Nothing taped under the workbench, nothing hiding behind the water heater. The only thing remaining was the door at the far end of the room. We walked towards it and saw that it had a locking mechanism on it like the front and back door. Caleb unlocked it with a push of a button, and we slowly opened it, peering through. A stone passageway spread out in front of us, the narrow walls barely larger than the doorframe. The floor turned to dirt past the threshold. We walked in, single file, leaving the door open behind us. After a few minutes of walking, the hallway turned right and we followed the path, veering along with it. The path stayed this direction for a few hundred feet.
What the hell is this?
Caleb muttered, squinting through the dim light the flashlight afforded of the path. The light soon hit a wall in front of us, and we made the sharp left to continue the path. Ahead, we could see light streaming through a hole in the ceiling, and we rushed towards it. The path ended at an iron ladder protruding up through the dirt and into the stone above us. We looked up towards the light at the top of the ladder and saw a manhole cover, the spaces in an even circular pattern. A number pad was drilled in next to the manhole cover, and the light next to it glowing red. The black dome of a security camera was attached on the other side. Caleb climbed the ladder and pushed the manhole cover. It didn't move. "I've seen this crap before," the girl said, and I could tell now that she was chomping on a piece of gum. "Secret passageways in and out of the house. They do this crap to try to get us to leave." She rolled her eyes and gave the camera the finger, as if to tell the people watching exactly what she thought of that idea.
Even if we wanted to, we couldn't.
Caleb replied, jumping down the few feet from the top of the ladder.
It won't budge. Probably needs a code.
"So we just leave it?" I asked. Caleb nodded.
For now.
He shined his flashlight against the end of the passageway and felt it with his hands.
Looks like that's the end of it. Let's head back. Nothing we can do about this right now.
On our way back, I learned that the girl's name was Raven, and she was newly 18. She had barely made the cutoff. She was one of the few that played the game confidently, excited more about the experience than the money. Although she told me through snaps of her gum that she did need the money. Coming from Harlem, her family had had it rough since the latest riots. That was why she entered. For her mom and little sister. I nodded and said nothing, mainly trying to ignore the question I knew she was going to ask eventually, which she did, while walking back up the basement steps into the main level of the house. "So why are you here?" Long story. I smiled tightly and felt my body tense in response. A few hours later, the sky began to darken and Caleb called everyone into the living room. The first night was always critical, and we needed to be ready. The nervous-looking blonde lady, Peggy, had started a fire in the fireplace using one of her matches and was poking the logs gently, staring off into space. I saw Dylan whispering quietly to an elderly man with short white hair and bifocals. Raven was perched on the edge of the love seat, swinging her legs against the soft cushioning. Ponytail was next to her, his hands grasping the notebook he had been writing in all afternoon. A few others were scattered around. The atmosphere was tensed, charged. The air seemed to be electrified.
All right.
Caleb said, clearing his throat.
We all know what we're here for. Those guys outside do not stand a chance if we work together and stay efficient. Our main goal tonight is simply guard duty. 3 guards, 1 for each outside door up here, and another for the basement door, just to make sure that manhole isn't breached.
He paused.
Even if it is, they aren't allowed to enter the house until day 10 without disqualification, so I think we'll be fine. But we should still take the precaution.
A few people nodded. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pressed my nails into my arm.
We'll do 3-hour shifts. A few of those should get us to daylight. Try not to eat too much food for now. Fill up your water bottles while everyone's awake. And no one go anywhere alone once we set up the guards. After we get up tomorrow, let's make sure...
He trailed off and stared out the window. Everyone turned. The light was dim, but it was still early in the evening, and we were able to clearly make out the figures approaching from the tree line. Their dark blue jumpsuits in stark contrast to their bodies in the darkening night. There were 4 or 5 approaching the back porch. One held a huge semi-automatic gun over his shoulder, the body of it casting a dark shadow over his face. A petite girl with an orange pixie cut was doing tricks with a butterfly knife, her face devoid of any emotion. The other 2 men were holding shotguns and walking around the exterior of the house.
We're fine.
Caleb said quietly, but his voice wavered.
They can't even break a pane of glass without being ejected right now.
A large bang from the other side of the house made everyone jump, and the loud laughter from the outside could be heard through the windows. I glanced around. Even Raven's resolve seemed to be wavering. her lips a thin line. From the direction of the front door came a noise that made Peggy fall off of the fireplace ledge. It sounded like someone scratching along the length of the glass front door. I peeked around from my place on the couch and saw another girl, this one brutish and muscular, carving something with a knife into the glass. I whipped my head back around. Someone in the room cleared their throat, and all eyes fell upon the older man in the back. He was rubbing his glasses with his shirt.
Caleb, I think you, Dylan, and I should have first watch. Let's leave the rest of them to go upstairs for now. We'll sort out the other guard duties later.
He smiled patiently and put his bifocals back on. As the rest of us headed upstairs, I glanced at the windows again. I was greeted by the sight of a tall, blonde-haired girl sucking on the barrel of her gun, her jumpsuit unzipped to show her bright pink undershirt underneath. When she saw me watching her, she smiled around the barrel and waved slowly. Ugh, I shuddered and continued walking. The only other thing in the bedrooms besides the mattress, pillows, and blankets are the thin notebook laptops, one for each of us. Internet and everything. Although most of us are skeptical about if it's the real web or not, in the past, contestants have been known to make videos to kill their spare time or try to appeal for help from the public to figure out where they are. I'm using it for neither. I'm writing my story out and putting it on the best place I know, Reddit. I figure I'm as equipped as I can be for what's about to come. I've prepped and planned. It may be a good idea to have it documented, though. A good portion of people don't even survive the 14 days, and if they do, they usually don't discuss it after. In this way, you get the full experience. What it's really like to be a contestant on The Killing House.